My daughter's husband poured boiling water on her arm. Blisters formed instantly on her delicate skin, while my grandson screamed in terror. When she could finally visit me 3 weeks later, I saw the scars. My blood boiled, just like the water he used to mark her. That same night, I made a single phone call. The next morning, her husband called me begging for forgiveness. But it was already too late. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And write in the comments, where are you watching from? We love to know how far our stories travel. The smell of cinnamon filled my little shop that October afternoon. I was arranging new embroidery when Lucy's familiar silhouette appeared in the doorway. My heart filled with that automatic joy only a mother knows. But something was different. She was wearing a long-sleeved blouse despite the heat. Her face once bright as the sun looked like a candle about to go out. "Mom," she said softly, forcing a smile. Lucy was always my light, my hope in human form. Since she was little, her dreams were as big as the sky. She wanted to study travel, see the world beyond the mountains that surrounded our city. And she did it. She graduated as a teacher. She married Raymond, a civil engineer from an influential family. And they had Matthew, my precious 7-year-old grandson. I put the embroidery aside and hugged her, feeling her body tense up. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Come on." I made sweet iced tea. I invited guiding her to the small sitting room in the back of the shop. As I poured the drink, Lucy moved and her sleeve rode up just a few inches. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough to make my heart stop. On the delicate skin of her wrist was a red blistered mark. It had irregular edges that looked like the map of a nightmare. "What is that?" I asked. My voice was firmer than I expected. Lucy pulled her sleeve down with the speed of someone hiding a terrible secret. "Nothing, Mom." I spilled hot water, making coffee. The lie sounded so rehearsed I almost believed her. Almost. I wanted to insist, to rip the truth from her. But something stopped me. An ancient fear, maybe. The fear of discovering my worst nightmare was real. Instead, I asked about Matthew, about her classes at the school where she taught. I tried to read between the lines for any clue. Just then Matthew ran in. His little feet made noise on the shop's worn wooden floor. "Grandma, my little warrior," I whispered, hugging him tightly. His eyes, so much like his mother's, shone with an innocence I prayed would never be stolen. I waited for a moment when Lucy went to the bathroom to kneel at Matthew's level. "Is your daddy doing okay?" I asked casually, trying to keep my voice light. Matthew's smile vanished like a cloud covering the sun. He looked down at his feet, swinging them back and forth. "Daddy yells a lot." He finally answered so quietly, I had to lean in. "His face gets red as a beet when he's mad." My heart sank. Matthew continued his words, spilling out like water from a broken dam. "Yesterday he threw the hot kettle on the floor. Mommy cried." I swallowed, trying to control the shaking in my hands. Before I could ask more, Lucy came back. The subject died like a candle blown out in the wind. They stayed a little longer. Lucy avoided my gaze. Matthew drew in an old notebook I kept for him. When they left, I watched them from the window as they walked down the cobblestone street. Lucy was hunched over, as if carrying an invisible weight. Matthew skipped beside her, unaware of the abyss opening up beneath his feet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the burn on Lucy's arm danced behind my closed eyelids. It wasn't an accidental burn. I knew those marks. It was intentional. It had a defined pattern, as if someone had deliberately poured something scalding on her skin. Morning came, bringing decision instead of fear. I picked up the phone and dialed Raymond's number, my son-in-law, the man I trusted with my daughter's happiness. "Linda." His voice sounded polite, almost kind. "To what do I owe the honor? I saw the burns on Lucy's arm." I said it flat out. My voice was steadier than my heart. There was a silence on the other end. It only lasted a few seconds, but it said more than 1,000 words. "So what if I did?" His voice changed completely. It turned cold as ice. "What are you going to do about it? An old basket weaver against a Vincent, his last name, the name of one of the most influential families in the state. He said it like a shield, an armor protecting him from consequences." I hung up without answering. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the phone back on the hook. The truth was right there, raw and terrible like an open wound. Raymond was burning my daughter, marking her like she was property, and he thought he was above the law because of his name. I could have cried. I could have drowned in despair, but instead I felt something else build inside me, something ancient and fierce, like a snake waking from a long sleep. Raymond had made a terrible mistake. He underestimated a mother's power. I picked up the phone again, but this time I dialed a different number, a number I hadn't used in years, saved in an old faded address book. Michael. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "It's me, Linda. I need your help." Michael Sullivan had been my late husband's friend, a man who knew the dark corners of the law, the paths that don't appear on official maps. He answered on the third ring as if he'd been waiting for my call all these years. "Linda," he replied simply. "It's about time." 3 days later, I was sitting at a cafe in downtown Denver. The afternoon sun warmed the historic brick facades. Tourists took pictures of the old clock tower, and I waited a full cup of coffee, untouched, in front of me. Michael arrived right on time as always. His hair was grayer, his face more lined by time, but his eyes, those eyes that saw right through people, they were the same. "Show me," he said without ceremony after sitting down. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were the photos I had taken with my old cell phone while Lucy slept at my house the night before, images of the burns on her arms, some new others already healing. They formed a map of suffering on her skin. Michael examined each one with a blank expression, but I noticed his fingers tightening on the paper. "Raymond Vincent," I said quietly. "He thinks he can do this because his family controls half the city." Michael nodded slowly. "The Vincents buy judges like people buy groceries at the market," he commented. "The police won't help you." "I know," I answered. "That's why I came to you." Michael looked at me for a long moment, as if measuring my determination. "What do you want, Linda?" "Justice," I replied simply. The word hung between us thick as smoke. Michael put the photos back in the envelope. "Justice isn't free, and it's not clean like in the movies." "Are you sure?" I thought of Lucy, the baby girl I held in my arms, the daughter I taught to embroider, the woman who dreamed of a better world. I thought of the burns on her skin, the terror in her eyes, Matthew's future growing up in a house where violence was normal. "I'm sure," I replied. My voice left no room for doubt. Michael stood up, putting the envelope in the inside pocket of his jacket. "Don't look for me. When the time is right, I'll find you." As I watched him leave, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, only to be replaced by a different one. I had just set a gear in motion, a machine whose nature I only partially understood. The next week, I kept my routine with deliberate effort. I opened the shop every morning. I wove baskets under the soft light from the window. I sold crafts to tourists. I smiled when I had to. I spoke when it was appropriate. But inside, I was pure contained fire. Lucy visited me again, this time with new marks hidden under her sleeves. Her gaze was more distant, like she was retreating somewhere inside herself where Raymond couldn't reach her. It was a survival strategy I knew well. My own mother had done the same during the years of abuse from my father. I wanted to scream that help was on the way, that she didn't have to endure this. But I held back. Any change in my behavior could alert Raymond. Instead, I applied aloe vera cream to the newest burns. Some were shaped perfectly like heated metal spoons. I swallowed my tears. "I'm fine, Mom," Lucy whispered as I treated an ugly mark on her inner elbow. "I deserve it. I'm a terrible wife." Her words almost broke me. That was his voice speaking through her, the lies he planted in her mind while he burned her body. I bit my tongue until I tasted the metallic tang of blood. It wasn't the time to contradict her. That would only push her away. It was time to wait. 2 weeks after my talk with Michael, I noticed a black car parked on the corner across from my shop. It stayed there all day. The driver was invisible behind the dark tinted windows. The next day, the same car appeared again, and the next. I never saw anyone get in or out, but I knew I was being watched. Strangely, that silent presence calmed me. It meant Michael hadn't forgotten. The gears were turning. It was Wednesday when Raymond showed up at my shop. He walked in like he owned the place. His expensive suit and gold watch were a stark contrast to the worn walls and humble baskets. Mother-in-law. He greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What a quaint little place. I kept weaving the basket in my hands, as if his presence was no more annoying than a fly on the wall. Raymond, I replied simply. He walked around the shop, touching the crafts with disdain. You know, I've noticed Lucy is very attached to you lately. Frequent visits, long calls. I kept my eyes on my work. We're mother and daughter. Yes, yes. He waved his hand, dismissing the obvious. But I worry these visits are distracting her from her duties at home. Matthew needs his mother's attention. I need a present wife. I finally looked up at him. And Lucy needs a husband who doesn't burn her with boiling water. His smile froze. For an instant, I saw the mask slip, revealing the darkness underneath. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow was gone, replaced by calculated charm. Oh, Linda, always with your wild imagination. Lucy is so clumsy, always having accidents in the kitchen. He leaned closer over the counter. It would be a shame if those accidents got worse, don't you think? Fear cut through me like a knife, but I didn't show it. Instead, I looked past him toward the shop window. The black car was still there, silent, like a promise. It would be a terrible shame, I replied calmly, for everyone involved. Raymond narrowed his eyes, trying to decipher the meaning behind my words. Then, with one last evaluating look, he left the shop. He left behind only the scent of his expensive cologne and an unspoken threat. That night, Michael finally called me. It started. That's all he said before hanging up. I sat on the porch of my small house looking at the stars over Denver. The air smelled like jasmine and damp earth after a light rain. On nights like this, I used to feel peace. But that night, what I felt was very different. It was anticipation. The next morning, the news hit like thunder on a clear day. Raymond Vincent, the respectable engineer from a traditional family, was under federal investigation. Embezzlement, contract fraud, money laundering. The accusations piled up like storm clouds. I turned on the small TV in the shop just in time to see Raymond leaving the federal building in Denver, trying to hide his face from the cameras. His lawyer made hasty statements about baseless accusations and political persecution. But Raymond's terrified look told another story. Inside me, a strange feeling bloomed. It wasn't exactly satisfaction or joy. It was something more primitive, more honest. It was the feeling of the scales beginning to balance. Lucy showed up at the shop hours later with Matthew. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Did you see the news?" she asked quietly after Matthew got distracted with the toy soldiers I kept for him. I nodded. I saw. "He says it's a conspiracy, that someone is out to destroy him." She continued, her voice trembling. "He's furious, Mom. I've never seen him like this." My heart ached. "Are you safe there?" Lucy looked away. He didn't come home last night. He's at the office with the lawyers." I took her hands in mine. I noticed how she flinched when I touched near a recent burn. "Stay here. You and Matthew can sleep in the guest room." "I can't," she replied quickly, fear obvious in her voice. "He'd be even more furious if he found out. He said I need to be at home to keep up appearances." Before I could insist, the shop door opened and a young woman walked in. Perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, a microphone in her hand. Behind her, a man with a camera on his shoulder. "Mrs. Linda Ruiz?" the young woman asked with a professional smile. "I'm Amanda Miller from Denver 7 News. We'd like to talk about your son-in-law, Raymond Vincent." Lucy turned even paler, grabbing my arm tightly. I felt the terror radiating from her like heat from a flame. "No comment," I answered firmly, putting myself between the reporter and my daughter. "Please leave my shop." The young woman hesitated, clearly not expecting resistance. "Just a few questions about the accusations and about the rumors of domestic violence." "Out," I repeated. My voice left no room for argument. When the door closed behind them, Lucy collapsed into a chair, shaking. "How do they know?" she whispered. Who told them about what happens at home?" I shook my head, faking ignorance while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I don't know, honey. Maybe someone saw something, said something." Lucy looked me in the eyes. For a moment I was afraid she could see right through me, see the fire I had started. But she just lowered her head, defeated. "He's going to blame me for this," she mumbled. "He'll say I talked, that I betrayed him." I held her face between my hands, forcing her to look at me. "Listen to me, Lucy. What Raymond does to you is not your fault. It never has been. It never will be." A single tear rolled down her face. "You don't understand, Mom. He said if I ever tried to leave him, he'd take Matthew from me, that no one would believe me against a Vincent." I looked at Matthew playing innocently in the corner, my grandson, the bright-eyed boy who deserved so much more than a house ruled by fear. "Things are changing," I said softly. "Trust me." That night, after Lucy and Matthew left, despite my protests, I received another visitor. Michael slipped in through the back door like a shadow moving along the wall. "The feds found compromising documents in his office," he reported without preamble. "Overpriced contracts, offshore accounts, payments to public officials. The family is trying to cover it up, but too many people are involved." "And what about the other things?" I asked. "About Lucy?" Michael leaned against the table, his face partly lit by the dim lamp. "We have testimonies. The housekeeper, the gardener, even the driver. They all saw the marks. They heard the screams, but without Lucy, we don't have a case. She needs to testify, Linda. She needs to show the burns, tell the story." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that truth. "She's scared." He threatened her with Matthew. Michael sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Raymond has been bribing family court judges for years. In a normal custody battle, he would win. And now—" a slow smile formed on his lips. "Now he's cornered. The family can't protect him like they used to. Everyone is trying to save their own skin." I felt a flame of hope ignite in my chest. "So there's a chance?" "There is," Michael confirmed, "but only if Lucy is brave." After Michael left, I sat in the darkness thinking about bravery. Not the bravery from the movies, not grand and spectacular, but the quiet bravery that women like me and Lucy needed every day. The bravery to wake up and face another day. The bravery to protect the ones we love, even when our own world is falling apart. The next morning I went to Lucy's house, an imposing mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in Denver. It had high walls and a meticulously kept garden, a monument to the Vincent family's wealth, and for my daughter, a gilded cage. The housekeeper met me with frightened eyes, whispering that Mr. Vincent was home and in a bad mood. I ignored her warning and went straight to the living room. I found Raymond on the phone, his face red with anger. "I don't care what it costs," he yelled into the receiver. "Buy the damn judge, buy the DA, buy whoever you have to." When he saw me, his eyes narrowed dangerously. "I'll call you back," he muttered into the phone before hanging up. "What are you doing here, mother-in-law?" "I came to see my daughter," I replied calmly, though I could feel my heart racing. "Lucy is indisposed," he answered sharply. "Come back another day." I stood firm. "Where is she, Raymond?" Something in my voice must have sounded different because he studied me with new attention. "Why the rush, Linda? Why now?" He stepped closer, his expensive cologne invading my space. "It's curious how all these accusations suddenly surfaced, isn't it? Almost as if someone was coordinating the whole thing." I didn't back down. "Where is my daughter?" A cruel smile formed on his lips. "You want to see her fine." He led me upstairs to the master bedroom. He opened the door with a theatrical gesture. He revealed Lucy sitting on the edge of the bed, shrunken like a wounded bird. She looked up when we entered, and the terror in her eyes chilled my blood. "Look who came to visit, dear," Raymond announced with false politeness. "Your mother is worried about you." Lucy tried to smile, but her lips were trembling too much. "I'm fine, Mom, just a little tired." That's when I noticed. She was wearing a short-sleeved blouse, and her arms, which had been covered in burns, We're clean. Perfectly clean. See? Raymond smiled triumphant. She's perfectly fine. All those rumors. So absurd. Right, dear. Lucy nodded mechanically, still not meeting my eyes. Where is Matthew? I asked, my stomach sinking. With my mother, Raymond answered immediately. She loves spending time with her grandson. I understood everything in that moment. Raymond had hidden the evidence. He probably forced Lucy to use some special makeup to cover the burns. And he was using Matthew as an emotional hostage. Lucy would never talk as long as her son was under the Vincent family's control. I'd like a few minutes alone with my daughter, I asked, looking directly at Raymond. He hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave us alone, but worried about appearances. 5 minutes, he finally conceded. I have important calls to make. When the door closed behind him, I ran to Lucy, taking her hands. What did he do to you? I whispered urgently. Where are the marks? Lucy looked at the door, terrified, before answering in a voice that was barely audible. Waterproof makeup, if I take it off. Or tell anyone. He said I'll never see Matthew again. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. Honey, you can't go on like this. He's going to kill you one day. I'd rather die than lose my son, she replied, with a determination that scared me. In that moment, I understood. I had underestimated both a mother's love, Lucy's for Matthew, and Raymond's cruelty. He had found the perfect weapon, a mother's love twisted into shackles. I looked at the clock. Our time was running out. Listen, I whispered quickly. Things are going to change. Trust me. Just hold on a little longer. Before Lucy could answer, the door opened again. Raymond walked in, his fake smile back in place. Time's up, ladies. I'm sure you can continue this chat another time. I left the mansion with a heavy heart and a mind on fire. At the gate, I noticed the black car parked discreetly across the street. A small spark of hope ignited inside me. The war wasn't lost yet. The following days brought an avalanche of news. The investigation into Raymond expanded like an out-of-control fire. It engulfed other members of the Vincent family, public officials, even a federal judge. Confidential documents were leaked to the press. Photos of clandestine meetings appeared in the newspapers. Recordings of compromising conversations circulated on social media. It was like watching an empire crumble brick by brick. I kept my routine, opening the shop, weaving baskets, closing at sunset. I answered with polite disinterest when customers mentioned the Vincent scandal, as the press had named it. But every new revelation was a small victory for me. Another stone removed from Lucy's prison. Michael appeared occasionally, always discreet, always with new information. The family matriarch is trying to distance herself, he told me on one visit. Raymond is more and more isolated. And Matthew? I asked. My grandson was still the centerpiece of this terrible chess game. Still with his paternal grandmother, Michael replied with a sigh. But there's movement. She realizes the ship is sinking. A week after my visit to the mansion, Lucy appeared at the shop. She was pale, thinner, but there was something different in her eyes, a spark I hadn't seen in a long time. Mom, she called softly after the last customer left. I need to show you something. She slowly raised her sleeve. She revealed the burns, no longer hidden by makeup, visible in all their horrible reality. Some were healing, others still fresh. All of them told the story of years of systematic abuse. Why now? I asked, feeling both relief and fear. Mrs. Vincent brought Matthew to see me yesterday, she explained. She was different. She said the family is worried about Raymond's impulsive behavior. Lucy let out a bitter laugh. After all these years, now they're worried. I held her hands. What does that mean? It means they're cutting him loose, Mom. The ship is sinking and the rats are jumping. Her eyes met mine, full of determination. I'm ready to talk. That same afternoon, Michael brought a federal prosecutor to my shop. Diana Reed was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a posture that radiated authority. She listened to Lucy's testimony in silence, taking occasional notes. Her face remained professional, but I saw her eyes soften when my daughter showed the most severe scars. How long has this been happening? Her voice was firmer than I expected. First it was insults, then shoves. The first burn was 2 years ago, when I accidentally spilled coffee on his newspaper. He heated a spoon on the stove and pressed it against my wrist. He said I needed to learn to be more careful. Diana nodded, documenting every word. And the most recent, Lucy lowered the collar of her blouse, revealing a reddish mark on her collarbone. 3 days ago, boiling water. He said I didn't make his tea at the right temperature. I saw Diana swallow hard, her professionalism momentarily shaken. Mrs. Vincent, we will need a full medical exam to document all the injuries. We also need prior testimony. Anyone who witnessed the abuse or saw the marks before. I saw them, I said immediately. Many times. The housekeeper too, Lucy added. And the driver. Raymond didn't care who was watching when it happened. Arrogance, Michael commented from his corner. Typical. He thought he was above the law. Diana closed her notebook. We have enough for an arrest warrant for felony domestic violence. With that and the financial charges, he won't be getting out soon. And Matthew, Lucy asked, the fear returning to her voice. My son. With the evidence we have, we will get a temporary custody order for you, Diana assured her. His family might try to fight it, but under the circumstances— They won't fight, Michael interrupted, a slight smile on his lips. The Vincents are rats leaving a sinking ship. No one is going to risk their own neck to help Raymond now. That night, after everyone left, Lucy sat with me on the porch of my small house. Matthew was sleeping inside, exhausted, after a day of medical exams and testimony. How did you do it, Mom? She asked softly. How did you take down a man like Raymond? I looked up at the starry sky, weighing my words. I didn't do anything more than any mother would, I finally replied. I protected what's mine. Lucy studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I don't know if she believed me, if she suspected the extent of my involvement. Maybe it was better that way. Some truths are like knives. They hurt when exposed. The next morning, we watched Raymond's arrest on TV. He came out of the courthouse surrounded by federal marshals, his face twisted in a mask of hate and desperation. For a brief moment, he looked directly at the camera, as if he could see me through it. "This isn't over!" he screamed before being pushed into the patrol car. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Lucy trembled beside me, but she stood firm. Matthew, playing with his soldiers on the living room floor, looked up briefly at the TV. Then he went back to his game, showing no emotion. Children are surprisingly resilient, I thought. Maybe he could grow up without his father's shadow hanging over him. The days turned into weeks. Raymond's case became a national scandal, with new revelations surfacing daily. Other members of the Vincent family were implicated in his schemes. Former allies turned against him, offering testimony in exchange for immunity. The empire he and his family had built crumbled like a sandcastle. Lucy and Matthew stayed with me. Slowly, I watched my daughter return. Not the same as before, because some wounds never fully heal, but a stronger, more resilient version. She went back to teaching now at a school near my shop. Matthew made new friends. His laughter echoed through the house that had known only my silence for so long. Michael appeared occasionally, always discreet. We never spoke of what we had done, of the lines we had crossed. Some truths are best left in the shadows. One Sunday afternoon, Diana Reed showed up at my shop. She wasn't wearing her formal suit. She was in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair down. "Mrs. Ruiz," she greeted formally. "Can we talk?" I offered her coffee, which she accepted with a smile. We sat in the small back room, the scent of cinnamon and coffee filling the air. "Raymond's trial starts in 2 weeks," she informed me. "With the evidence we have, he's facing a severe sentence for both the financial crimes and the domestic violence." I nodded, waiting. There was something else to her visit. I could feel it. "It's curious how everything unfolded," she continued, her eyes studying me. All the evidence surfacing at once, the testimonies, the leaked documents, almost as if someone was orchestrating everything. I kept my expression neutral, stirring my coffee slowly. "Justice has its own ways, doesn't it?" Diana smiled slightly. "Yes, it does." She took a sip of coffee before continuing. You know, in law school, my professor used to say there are two kinds of justice, the kind from the courts and the kind from the street. The first is slow, imperfect, and sometimes fails. The second is fast, efficient, but dangerous. And which do you prefer? I asked. Depends on the day, she answered with surprising honesty. Then placing her cup on the table, she added, Some people didn't deserve the power they had. Raymond Vincent is one of them. We sat in silence for a moment. An unspoken understanding hung between us. What happened to his family? I finally asked. His mother went back to Europe. The brothers are trying to save what they can of the businesses, distancing themselves from him. Diana hesitated, then continued. The interesting part is that no one is really fighting for him. It's like they all know he deserves what's happening. When Diana left, I sat alone contemplating the whirlwind of the past few months. I had unleashed forces I barely understood. I had crossed lines I never imagined crossing. But when Lucy and Matthew returned from the market, she was laughing at something the boy had said. Her face was free of the constant fear that had haunted her for so long. I knew I would do it all again, without hesitation. Raymond's trial lasted less time than we expected. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies were devastating. Lucy spoke for almost 2 hours. Her voice gained strength as she described the years of abuse. She showed every scar. She explained every burn. When she finished, there was a heavy silence in the courtroom. I testified after her. I told what I had seen, how I had tried to help. I didn't mention Michael or the steps we took. Some truths remain buried. The housekeeper also testified. She described finding Lucy crying in the bathroom, applying ice to recent burns. The driver recounted Raymond's fits of rage, the threats he made openly. And then, surprisingly, Raymond's own mother, Mrs. Vincent, appeared to testify. She entered the courtroom with a quiet dignity, avoiding her son's gaze. Mrs. Vincent, the prosecutor began, were you aware of the abuse your son inflicted on his wife? Mrs. Vincent kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. Yes, she replied simply. A murmur went through the room. And you did nothing to stop it. She closed her eyes briefly. My husband was also a difficult man. In our family, women learn not to question. Then turning to Lucy for the first time, she added, I am so sorry, my dear. I failed you. I saw Lucy bring her hand to her mouth, shocked by the unexpected confession. Raymond, sitting with his lawyers, looked like he had aged 10 years. His face, once arrogant, now showed deep lines of despair. When the judge read the sentence, 18 years for domestic violence plus 12 for the financial crimes, Raymond showed no emotion. He just looked at me. A long, calculated look that chilled me to the bone. This isn't over, he muttered as the guards led him away. It wasn't an empty threat. It was a promise. That night, we celebrated quietly at home. It wasn't a victory for champagne and laughter. It was a respectful silence for survivors. Matthew fell asleep early, exhausted from the day's tension. Lucy and I stayed on the porch watching the stars. What happens now? She asked softly. Now. We live, I answered, one day at a time. Lucy rested her head on my shoulder like she did when she was a little girl. I'm scared, Mom. Scared he'll find a way to hurt us even from prison. I had that fear too, though I wouldn't admit it. The Vincent family might be weakened, but they still had connections, money, influence. And Raymond had time, lots of time. Time to plan, to nurture his hatred, to dream of revenge. I won't let him hurt you again. I promised, knowing it was a promise I might not be able to keep. Never again. 3 months after the trial, life had found a new rhythm. Lucy was teaching full-time. Matthew was adjusting well to his new school, and I continued with my craft shop. We rarely spoke of Raymond or what we had been through. It was as if we were trying to erase that chapter. Then one ordinary Wednesday, Michael appeared at the shop. His face was more serious than usual. His eyes were somber. There was an escape attempt, he reported. Raymond and 2 other prisoners. The guards intercepted them in time. I felt my heart stop for an instant. Was he coming here for us? Michael nodded slowly. They found maps, notes. He had planned everything carefully. "What do we do now?" I asked, my hands trembling slightly. "He's been transferred to a maximum security prison in another state," Michael replied. "But that doesn't mean we're safe. He still has contacts, people who owe him favors." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed on the porch until dawn, watching the shadows, imagining assassins in every noise. Raymond's revenge loomed over us like a distant but inevitable storm. It was Lucy who proposed the solution a week later. "Let's go," she said at breakfast. "Leave Denver. Start over somewhere else." I looked at her surprised. "Abandon everything." "The shop." "Your school Matthew's friends." Lucy nodded. Her eyes showed a determination that painfully reminded me of myself. "It's the only way to be truly free of him, Mom. As long as we're here, we'll always be Raymond Vincent's victims, the family that brought down the powerful Vincents. Somewhere else we can just be ourselves." I considered her words, feeling the weight of the decision. Denver had been my home for over 40 years. My husband was buried here. My memories, good and bad, were soaked into these cobblestone streets, these brick walls. But then I looked at Matthew drawing quietly at the kitchen table, and at the scars on Lucy's arms, marks that would never fully disappear. What was a place compared to their safety? "Where would we go?" I finally asked. Lucy smiled, the first truly free smile I'd seen on her face in years. "I was thinking Miami. Warm weather near the beach, good schools for Matthew, and far, far away from here." Michael helped with the arrangements. New documents, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood in Miami, discreet bank transfers. Diana Reed surprisingly also offered help making sure our whereabouts remained confidential in all official records. I sold the shop to a young artisan, a kind girl with bright eyes and skilled hands who reminded me of myself decades ago. I packed only the essentials, some clothes, family photos, the weaving tools I inherited from my mother. The night before we left, I made one last visit to the cemetery. I knelt at my husband's simple grave, tracing the worn letters of his name. "We're leaving, my love," I whispered to the cold stone. "I protected our daughter just like you would have, but now we need a new beginning." I felt hot tears on my cheeks. There was no answer, just the soft rustle of leaves in the trees above. But somehow, I felt peace. I felt he would understand. We left Denver before dawn in a rental car with dark windows. Michael drove us to the airport, his face impassive as always. "You saved our lives," I told him before we boarded. "I'll never forget it." He just nodded, squeezing my hand briefly. "You did the impossible, Linda. You brought down an empire with nothing but determination." I looked at Lucy and Matthew waiting in the boarding line. "It wasn't determination," I corrected softly. "It was love." The flight to Miami was smooth. The clouds below us looked as solid as the ground we had left behind. Matthew slept in the middle seat, his head resting on Lucy's arm. "Do you think he'll find us?" Lucy asked quietly, her fear still present. I took her hand, noticing how the scars were starting to fade. "No," I answered with a confidence I didn't fully feel. "This chapter is over." But even as I said the words, I felt a chill down my spine. Raymond was not a man who forgot. His hatred wouldn't lessen with time. It would only deepen like an infected wound. 30 years in prison would give him plenty of time to plan, to wait. I looked out the plane window, watching Colorado disappear under the clouds. We left behind not just a place, but a version of ourselves. The woman who got on that plane was no longer just Linda the artisan. She was Linda the woman who had defied an empire for her daughter. Linda who had learned that justice sometimes comes down unexpected paths. And if one day Raymond found us, he wouldn't find the same scared women. He would find survivors, forged in the fire of his own cruelty. Miami welcomed us with a humid, blazing heat, so different from the mild weather in Denver. Our house was in a colorful neighborhood, the buildings painted in vibrant shades of blue, pink, and yellow. The streets were lined with trees. People smiled. The air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and street food. Lucy found a job at a bilingual school where her experience was valued. Matthew adapted with the typical ease of children soon making friends. And I started over. I set up a small workshop in the back of the house where I continued to weave baskets and embroider napkins. At first I only sold to neighbors and Lucy's friends, then a shop in a tourist district began to carry my pieces. Soon, American and European tourists discovered my work charmed by what they called authentic Florida crafts, even though my designs still carried the influence of Colorado. Months turned into years. Lucy's scars faded to pale white lines on her tanned Florida skin. Matthew grew into a tall, thoughtful teenager with a talent for drawing. Our lives found a rhythm, a peace I never imagined possible. Occasionally, news from Denver reached us. Michael called every so often, always from different numbers, always brief coded conversations. Diana Reed sent us Christmas cards with generic messages, but they reassured us that we were safe. Forgotten. Raymond remained in prison, his empire dismantled, his family scattered. Justice had prevailed, or so we thought. It was an ordinary Thursday when our peace was shattered. I was on the porch weaving a new design when I noticed the car. Black, dark-tinted windows, parked across the street. It could be a coincidence. Miami was full of wealthy tourists with rental cars, but something about the way it just sat there, motionless. It awakened a cold chill of memory. I watched the car all afternoon. It didn't move. No one got in or out. When Lucy arrived from work with Matthew right behind her, I casually mentioned the vehicle. She froze, following my gaze. "How long has it been there?" she asked. Her voice was low so Matthew wouldn't hear. "Since noon, at least." Lucy took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "It's probably nothing. Tourists, maybe." But that night, she checked the locks 3 times before bed. I stayed up late sitting near the front window watching. The car was still there when I finally gave in to sleep. The next morning it was gone. I felt a moment of relief followed by a wave of paranoia. Where did it go? Why, who was watching us? I called Michael that day using the emergency number he gave us years ago. "A black car," he repeated. His voice was tense. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," I replied, feeling the familiar fear return. "It's him, isn't it? Raymond found a way." Michael was silent for a moment. "He's still in prison," he said finally. "We check regularly, but his mother, Eleanor, passed away 2 months ago. In her will, she left everything to a nephew, Arthur Vincent, a cousin of Raymond's who was always loyal to him." I felt my blood run cold. "And he could be looking for us." "It's possible," Michael admitted. "I'll investigate. In the meantime, be vigilant. Any suspicious movement, you call me immediately." In the following days, the black car reappeared, always at a distance, always just watching. We could never see who was inside. I started accompanying Lucy and Matthew everywhere. To school, to work, to the market. My eyes were constantly checking over my shoulder, looking for the vehicle that had become a symbol of our fear. It was Matthew who finally saw him, the driver. We were coming back from the market when the boy, now 13, stopped abruptly. "That man is following us," he said discreetly, pointing to a middle-aged man standing near a fruit stand. "He was at my school yesterday, and at the restaurant where we had lunch today." I looked in the direction he pointed and felt my heart drop. The man was tall, thin, with well-kept graying hair. He wore expensive clothes, dark sunglasses. He had a familiar arrogance in his posture, the same way Raymond carried himself, as if the world belonged to him. "Let's go home," I whispered, pulling Matthew and Lucy. "Now." That night we made a decision. We couldn't keep running forever, living in fear, looking over our shoulders. If Arthur Vincent had found us, others could too. Raymond's shadow would follow us forever unless we face him, Lucy concluded. Her voice was surprisingly firm. "Once and for all." Michael arrived 2 days later, bringing Diana Reed with him. They stayed in a nearby hotel, never visiting our house directly so they wouldn't draw attention. We met in different cafes, park shops, always moving, always vigilant.
Arthur Vincent arrived in Miami 3 weeks ago, Michael confirmed. He's been visiting Raymond in prison regularly for the past year. We know he's looking for you, but we don't know what he's planning. And we can't just arrest him for being in the same city as you, Diana added with frustration. He hasn't done anything illegal. Yet, Lucy completed grimly. That's when we formed our plan. We wouldn't run again. This time we would set a trap. If Arthur wanted to get to us, we would leave a path open for him, but on our terms, on our territory. Diana organized discreet police surveillance. Michael hired private security guards to monitor our house and the places we frequented, and I decided to do something I never imagined. I bought a small revolver. Michael taught me how to use it in an isolated field on the outskirts of the city. My hands shook with every shot. The recoil sent waves of pain up my aging arms, but I kept practicing, day after day, until the weight of the metal felt familiar, until I could hit the target consistently. I hope I never need this, I commented as we cleaned the guns after one session. Michael looked at me with his wise, tired eyes. Me too, Linda. But in this world, sometimes the best defense is being prepared for the worst. 2 weeks later, Arthur made his move. It was Sunday morning. Lucy and Matthew had left for church. Part of the plan. Leave me home alone as bait. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the distinct sound of someone forcing the back door. My heart sped up, but my hands stayed firm. Slowly, I took the revolver hidden in the kitchen drawer. The weight of the metal was comforting. Real. I placed myself against the wall, breathing deeply to calm my nerves. The door opened. Quiet footsteps crossed the small laundry room. Then he appeared, Arthur Vincent, even more imposing up close, tall, elegant, with the same look of superiority the entire Vincent family seemed to possess. "Mrs. Ruiz," he greeted with false politeness as if he were an expected guest. "We finally meet." I kept the gun pointed at him. My voice was calmer than I expected. "What do you want, Arthur?" He smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just to talk. Raymond sends his regards." "Your cousin is in prison where he belongs," I answered, "and that's where he'll stay for the next 30 years. Arthur walked casually around the kitchen, examining the picture frames on the wall as if he were in a museum. "Do you know what Raymond told me, that you are the true architect of his downfall, not Lucy? Not the prosecutors. You." He turned to me, his eyes cold. "A simple craft seller who brought down the Vincent empire." "What do you want?" I repeated, my finger firm on the trigger. "Justice," he replied simply. "An eye for an eye. You destroyed his life, so he sent me to destroy yours." It was then that I noticed the metallic glint in his hand. A knife, long and sharp. My heart raced, but I held my composure. "You are not going to hurt my family," I declared, my voice leaving no room for doubt. Arthur laughed, a cold, calculated sound. "I don't intend to hurt anyone, Linda, just to take a message back to Raymond." He took a step forward, the knife reflecting the morning light. "That his revenge has been served." At that moment, I heard sirens in the distance. The signal. Michael and Diana had detected the invasion. Help was on the way, but Arthur heard it too. His face twisted in fury. "You planned this," he hissed, lunging toward me. I didn't hesitate. Michael's training took over. My body acted on instinct. 2 shots, not to kill, to incapacitate. The first hit his shoulder, the second his leg. Arthur fell. The knife clattered on the tile floor. The police arrived minutes later, followed by Michael and Diana. While the paramedics treated Arthur, I sat on the porch. The revolver was now safe in Michael's hands. My body was shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline finally fading. "It's over," Diana said, sitting next to me. "For real this time." "How can you be sure?" I asked, my voice weak. "Because we found evidence in Arthur's hotel room, letters from Raymond detailing the whole plan. He didn't just want to scare you. He wanted to eliminate the witnesses who put him in prison." Diana placed her hand on my shoulder. "With this, Raymond will face new charges, conspiracy to commit murder. His sentence will be extended, probably for the rest of his life."
When Lucy and Matthew returned, they found the house surrounded by police cars and an ambulance. Lucy ran to me, panic in her eyes. "I'm fine," I assured her, hugging her tightly. "We're all fine now." That night, after everyone had left, the police, the paramedics, Michael and Diana, I sat on the porch with Lucy and Matthew. The Miami sky was clear, dotted with stars that seemed infinitely brighter after all we had been through. "You could have died today," Lucy said softly, holding my hand. Her scars brushed against my wrinkled skin, marks of different battles, but both witnesses to our survival. "But I didn't," I replied simply. "And now he will never reach us again." Matthew, who had been unusually quiet since he came home and found out what happened, finally spoke. "You shot him, Grandma. You really shot him." I looked at my grandson, almost a man now, but still with that innocence in his eyes I had fought so hard to preserve. "Yes," I answered honestly, "to protect our family." He nodded slowly, absorbing this new truth about his 60-something-year-old grandmother. Not just a basket weaver, but a woman capable of facing evil when necessary. "You're brave," he said finally. I smiled, stroking his hair like I did when he was little. "No, honey, just a mother, just a grandmother." In the days that followed, our story was briefly in the news, first locally, then nationally when the connection to the Vincent case was made. Reporters showed up at our door wanting details, wanting to turn our pain into headlines. We refused all interviews. Our story was ours, not a spectacle for public consumption. Diana ensured the legal proceedings were discreet. Arthur was charged with attempted murder, illegal possession of a weapon, and conspiracy. The letters found in his hotel room served as evidence not only against him, but also against Raymond, who received new conspiracy charges from his prison cell. He will never see the light of day as a free man again, Michael assured me on his last visit before returning to Denver. "Now you can rest, Linda." Rest. Such a simple word, but it carried the weight of years of vigilance, of fear. Could it be true? Were we finally free 6 months after the incident with Arthur? Our life had found a new rhythm. Lucy received a promotion at her school. Matthew, perhaps inspired by recent events, decided he wanted to study law. "To help people like us, Grandma," he explained. As for me, I opened a small shop in the historic district of Miami, not just to sell my crafts, but to teach. Twice a week I offered weaving classes to local women, many from vulnerable situations. It wasn't just about baskets and embroidery. It was about independence, about creating with your own hands, about transforming pain into beauty. In one of those classes, a young woman arrived with her face marked by bruises, poorly hidden under makeup. Her hands trembled as she tried to learn the first embroidery stitches. I recognized the same fear in her that I had seen in Lucy's eyes years ago. After class, I offered her a coffee in the small space at the back of the shop. "My name is Linda," I said softly, "and I can help, if you want it." She looked up surprised. "Help with what?" "With whatever you need," I replied discreetly, indicating the bruises. The young woman, her name was Gabby, broke down crying. She told me about her violent husband, the constant fear, the shame that kept her from seeking help. "You think there's no way out," I said, "that he's too powerful, that no one will believe you." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I thought so too once." I continued, rolling up my sleeves to show my own scars. Not burns like Lucy's, but marks from my own battle. "But we are not alone, Gabby. We are never truly alone." That same afternoon, I called Diana, who now worked for a women's rights organization. The next day, Gabby had a safe place to stay, legal counsel, and the first glimmer of hope in years. And so the Weavers' Sanctuary was born, not officially. Not as a formal organization, but as a silent network of women helping women. My shop became more than a business. It became a refuge. Lucy joined me in this work, offering counseling after completing a specialization course. Matthew helped with technical issues, creating a discreet website and secure communication systems. Michael and Diana remained distant allies, but present when needed. The loop had closed. The pain we had lived through had transformed into purpose. into healing not just for us, but for others. On a particularly hot night 3 years after the incident with Arthur, Lucy and I were sitting on the porch. Matthew was inside studying for his high school finals. "Did you ever imagine what our life would have been like if I never married Raymond?" Lucy asked softly. I considered the question, rocking gently. Quieter, certainly. Less pain, fewer scars. "But also without Matthew," she added. "Without the sanctuary, without all the women we've helped." I looked at my daughter, no longer the scared young woman, but a strong, confident woman of purpose. The scars on her arms had faded until they were almost gone, though we both knew they would remain forever. "We don't choose the wounds we receive," I finally answered, "but we can choose what we do with them." Lucy nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "You know what I think, Mom, maybe true justice wasn't when he was arrested, or when we shot Arthur. No. True justice is this: being here, living well, helping others, transforming what he intended as our destruction into strength for other women." Her words touched something deep in me. For so many years I thought of justice as punishment. Raymond in prison, Arthur neutralized. But Lucy was right. True justice was deeper, more lasting. It was the transformation of pain into purpose, of fear into bravery, of silence into a voice. That night when I finally went to bed, I stopped in front of the mirror. The face looking back at me was that of a woman approaching 70. Completely gray hair, deep lines around my eyes and mouth, knotted hands from decades of weaving, but also the face of a warrior, a survivor. No longer just Linda the artisan, now Linda the protector, Linda the bringer of justice. The revolver I had used against Arthur remained locked in a wooden box in the back of my closet. I hadn't touched it in years. I hoped to never need it again, but its presence was a reminder that justice sometimes requires more than laws and courts, that a mother's love can be the most powerful and dangerous force in existence. The next morning I received a call from Diana. "Raymond is dead," she informed me. "Suicide in prison, apparently." I felt a wave of complex emotions. Not joy, not exactly relief, maybe just the feeling of a circle finally closing. "How?" I asked simply. "Hanged himself with his bedsheets. He left a letter." Diana hesitated. "He mentioned you, Linda. He said, 'You won.'" After hanging up, I sat for a long time in the yard watching the hummingbirds. The news of Raymond's death should have brought complete closure, but instead I just felt a quiet stillness, like the silence after a devastating storm. I didn't tell Lucy right away. I let her have one more day of peace without thinking of him. That night, when I finally shared the news, her reaction was similar to mine. "It's strange," she commented as we made dinner. "A part of me always imagined him alive, planning, waiting, as if he were immortal." "Men like him seem larger than life," I replied, chopping vegetables, "especially when they hurt us. We give them power over us, in our minds. And now," I paused, looking at my daughter, "now he's just a man who lived badly and died alone. Nothing more." 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail. No return address, just my name and address in an unknown script. Inside, I found only 2 items: a copy of Raymond's suicide note and an old photograph of Lucy, Matthew, and me taken in Denver years before our escape. The letter was short. "Linda, you won. You took everything from me. My freedom, my family, my name. I have nothing left to lose, but know this: even in death, I won't leave you in peace. The fear will live with you. The fear that you will never be truly safe, that my shadow will always follow you. Raymond Vincent." I stared at those hateful words, at the photograph he had somehow obtained, his last attempt to reach us, to scare us, even from the grave. Then I did something that surprised me. I laughed, a real liberating laugh, because I finally understood. Raymond had never grasped the true power we held. He thought fear was our weakness, when in reality it had become our strength. I burned the letter and the photo in the backyard. I watched the flames consume the last words of a man who once thought he was untouchable. As the smoke rose into the blue Florida sky, I felt the last traces of fear dissipate. That night I opened the box where I kept the revolver. I examined it one last time, then I methodically disassembled it just as Michael had taught me. The next day I took the pieces to different parts of the city, disposing of them one by one. I wouldn't need that weapon anymore. The battle was over. The Weavers' sanctuary continued to grow. More women came. They learned, they healed, they moved on. Some returned to help others, creating a chain of strength and solidarity. Lucy finally met Charles, a literature professor at her school, a kind, patient man who understood her past without letting it define their future. Matthew accepted him slowly, cautiously, but over time a genuine affection grew. As for me, I found a peace I never imagined. It wasn't the peace of innocence. That had been burned away with my daughter's arm years ago. It was the peace of survivors. Of warriors returned from battle scarred but victorious. On my 70th birthday, Lucy and Matthew organized a small celebration in our backyard. We invited the women from the sanctuary. Michael and Diana came all the way from Denver. "A toast," Lucy announced, raising her glass. "To my mother, Linda, who taught me that justice sometimes comes down unexpected paths, and that love can be the most revolutionary force in existence." As everyone raised their glasses, my eyes met Matthew's. He was a young man now, about to start law school. He smiled. "To justice," he added softly, "and to the women who fight for it, even when the world says it's impossible." The sun was setting over Miami, bathing our small garden in golden light. The scar on my arm, a reminder of the fight with Arthur, shone silver in the twilight. Lucy's scars, almost invisible now, told a story she shared with other women when needed. Scars, marks of battle, of survival, of transformation. No longer sources of shame, but medals of honor, silent witnesses to a truth Raymond never understood, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the world is a mother protecting her family, and that true justice doesn't come from courts or prisons. It comes from the refusal to let one man's cruelty define an entire family's future. That justice sometimes has the face of an old woman who weaves baskets and teaches other women to find their own strength. If this video touched your heart, subscribe to Elderly Stories and consider joining as a member so we can keep sharing incredible stories. Just click the link in the pinned comment below. Together we can break the cycle of silence that protects abusers and isolates victims. Thank you for listening. The strength is in each of us. Sometimes we just need an outstretched hand to remind us.